So Pam Bondi confirmed under oath, on camera, in front of Congress, that she has a secret list of Americans she's labeling domestic threats, and she refuses to show it to anyone, including the people whose literal job is to oversee her. She won't say who's on it, she won't say how you get on it, and she won't say how you get off it. But don't worry, she did find time to name drop the anti-fascist movement like it's September 2020 again. Last week, she appeared before the House Judiciary Committee for her first oversight hearing. Basically, Congress gets to question her under oath about what the Justice Department is doing. And Congresswoman Mary Gay Scanlon of Pennsylvania decided to ask her a very simple question. Did you compile the list of groups the government labels as threats that President Trump's memo ordered you to create? What followed was one of the most revealing 5-minute exchanges you will see from this Congress. She dodges, deflecting, insulting, and ultimately confirming the worst fears of anyone who cares about constitutional rights in this country. Again, let's watch her not answer a single question, and I will give you my take at the end.
I think the gentlelady from Pennsylvania.
Gentlelady from Pennsylvania is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Bondi, I'm here. On September 25th, President Trump signed a memorandum known as NSPM 7, purporting to address domestic terrorism. But Americans across the political spectrum were immediately alarmed by the memo's blurring of the line between unlawful conduct and constitutionally protected speech and activity, as well as its call to investigate, prosecute, and dismantle groups that the president and Stephen Miller described without evidence as, quote, an organized campaign of radical left terrorism. Now, counterterrorism experts were further alarmed by the administration's singular focus on left-wing extremism, combined with the sudden deletion from the DOJ website of decades of research and law enforcement analysis, which had concluded that right-wing extremism poses the greatest terrorism threat to Americans. The president's memo broadly and vaguely links violent conduct to ideologies, and it targeted specifically anti-American, anti-Christian, and anti-capitalist beliefs, as well as, quote, hostility to so-called traditional American views on family, religion, and morality, end quote. President Trump has repeatedly and openly, however falsely, tried to brand his political opponents with these sentiments listed in his memo. But as you know, as a lawyer, holding beliefs that the White House disagrees with is not a crime. And the statute defining domestic terrorism requires criminal acts, not just thoughts and ideas. That's why legal experts, nonprofit leaders, religious freedom and civil rights advocates immediately raised the alarm that the new presidential directive was a politically motivated attack on civil society designed to silence those who disagree with the administration. So, Ms. Bondi, Section 3 of that memo directed you, as Attorney General, to submit to the President and Stephen Miller a list of groups or entities whose members are engaged in acts that meet the definition of domestic terrorism. And then on December 4th, you directed the FBI to work with a variety of law enforcement entities to compile a list of groups and entities engaged in such acts by January 3rd, 2026, and to update that report every 30 days thereafter. So can we assume that you or persons under your direction at the Department of Justice have prepared that list of groups or entities who are designated as domestic terrorist organizations? And I just remind you that's a yes or no question. Did you prepare the list?
I'm not going to answer it yes or no, but what I will say is I know Antifa is part of that. I will talk to you about that.
I'm reclaiming my time. I asked you whether you
an
prepared
Antifa member
a
was
list.
arrested in Minneapolis federal
reclaiming
court for
my
cyber
time.
stalking.
Did you
they
have
ask a question
list?
and don't want an answer.
The answer is yes or no.
Time belongs to the gentlelady from Pennsylvania. Gentlelady can proceed.
Okay. So will you commit to providing this committee with any list of organizations that you have recommended be designated as domestic terrorist organizations?
We will comply with the law in all matters.
Will you commit to provide this committee with your list of entities that you recommend be designated as domestic terrorist organizations?
I'm not going to commit to anything to you because you won't let me answer questions.
Okay, well then, we do understand that your current position is that you have a secret list of people or groups that you are accusing of domestic terrorism, but you won't share it with Congress. And I'd remind you that when the U.S. government designates an entity as a foreign terrorist organization, it must report that to Congress and to the entity, because the government can make a mistake and the entity has the opportunity to contest it. So your position seems to be that if you falsely designate an American or an American organization as a terrorist group, there's nothing they can do about it. I think we get it. You don't want to answer the
No,
question.
you don't get anything regarding public safety.
Thank you.
Nothing.
Thank you for the insult. It's clear you didn't come to Congress prepared to answer questions that the American people have every right to have answered. But if you were to prepared to answer truthfully, here's what we expect the facts to show. The administration is keeping lists of Americans who the White House says are engaged in domestic terrorism. Those lists could include Americans who have not committed any acts of terrorism, but simply disagree with this administration, people like Renee Good and Alex Preddy. And your list may include clergy, elected officials, and members of indivisible groups across the country. And those lists likely don't include Proud Boys or Oath Keepers who were actually convicted. Americans have never tolerated political demagogues who use the government to punish people on an enemies list. It brought down McCarthy, it brought down Nixon, and it will bring down this administration as well.
And you were right.
Back.
That's why we're so glad they rescinded the
That's
memorandum targeting parents. For goodness sake, as the gentleman from California just pointed out in his 5 minutes.
Here's what you need to know that wasn't in that clip, because it makes this so much worse. First, the legal framework. According to Lawfare, a national security legal blog run by former government lawyers, NPR, the Congressional Research Service, and basically every national security expert who has weighed in on this, there is no legal authority in the United States to designate a domestic organization as a threat group. None. It does not exist. Faiza Patel, a national security expert at the Brennan Center for Justice, one of the most respected legal think tanks in the country, put it plainly when she told PBS, there is simply no system for creating domestic threat labels. The only process that exists under federal law is for foreign threat organizations, the law that governs how the government labels groups like Al-Qaeda and ISIS. And under that law, and this is the part that Congresswoman Scanlon was getting at, the government is required to notify Congress before putting a group on the list, publish the decision publicly, and give the group the right to challenge it in court. That's for known foreign threat groups. Those organizations get more due process under this system than American citizens and American nonprofits apparently get under Trump's order, National Security Presidential Memorandum 7, known as NSPM 7. Second, what NSPM 7 actually targets. The order, which Trump signed on September 25th, 2025, doesn't just go after people who commit acts of violence. According to the text of the memo itself, it identifies anti-Americanism, anti-capitalism, and anti-Christianity as signs of domestic threat activity. It targets hostility towards those who hold traditional American views on family, religion, and morality. Over 3,000 nonprofit organizations signed an open letter opposing it. 31 members of Congress wrote a letter raising concerns about whether it's even legal. Miles Taylor, who served as chief of staff at the Department of Homeland Security during Trump's first term, called the order deeply alarming. And a legal analysis from Arnold and Porter, one of the biggest law firms in the country, concluded that her follow-up order would have a significant chilling effect on the activities of individuals, organizations, and funders whom the administration views as opposed to its policies. A chilling effect, meaning people stop speaking up out of fear of being targeted. Third, and I really need you to hear this part, remember when the DOJ used to have research showing which ideologies actually posed the greatest threat of political violence to Americans? According to Snopes and reporting from 404 Media and The Hill, the Department of Justice quietly deleted a study from its website in September 2025. A study from the DOJ's own research arm, the National Institute of Justice, days after the Charlie Kirk incident, that found right-wing extremists had committed far more deadly attacks for political reasons than left-wing extremists since 1990. The study documented over 200 right-wing attacks resulting in hundreds of deaths, compared to roughly 40 left-wing attacks. They didn't update the research, they didn't add to it. They deleted it, and then 2 weeks later they issued NSPM 7, claiming the real threat is exclusively from the left. And fourth, she sat in front of the Senate Judiciary Committee during her confirmation hearing in January 2025 and pledged her exact words, "There will never be an enemies list within the Department of Justice." That was 13 months ago. Now she's maintaining an undisclosed political target list and telling a congresswoman, "You don't get anything regarding public safety," when asked to see it. Quite the evolution for someone who promised independence. So let me give you the language to explain this to anyone who asks. The administration ordered the Attorney General to create a list of domestic threat organizations. The Attorney General compiled that list in secret. She refuses to share it with Congress. There is no legal basis for it. There is no process for an organization to contest it. And the ideologies, the memo targets, anti-capitalism, criticism of Christianity, views on gender and immigration, are constitutionally protected beliefs, not crimes. This isn't countering political violence. This is a political opponents list with a national security label slapped on it. So what does this actually mean for you? If you've ever donated to a nonprofit that advocates for immigration reform, or climate action, or criminal justice reform, or reproductive rights, congratulations, you might be funding what this administration considers a domestic threat. If you attend a church that doesn't align with what Stephen Miller considers traditional American views on family, religion, and morality, your congregation could end up on a list. And you'll never know, because they won't tell you, and under this system, you have no right to find out. It's like getting a parking ticket that's also classified. Step back, and this is the machinery of a government that wants to punish its critics, and it's being assembled in broad daylight. The Charity and Security Network, a coalition that tracks how national security law affects nonprofits, noted that NSPM 7 directs the IRS to audit organizations suspected of being even loosely connected to what the government calls domestic threats, and the Treasury Department to trace their funding, using tools originally built for tracking terrorist money overseas. A lawfare analysis pointed out that the Trump executive order labeling the anti-fascist movement a domestic threat organization has no legal basis and cites none. It's not something enforceable, it's a political statement. But banks and platforms will treat it as real anyway, freezing accounts and kicking groups off their services just to cover themselves. The chilling effect is the point. And for what? Congresswoman Scanlon made a point in that hearing that deserves repeating. The PB organization was convicted of sedition, meaning they were convicted of conspiring to overthrow the government. The OK Militia Group was convicted of the same thing. Their leaders received sentences of 18 and 22 years, the longest in the entire Capitol events investigation. A Trump-appointed judge agreed their crimes qualified as acts of political violence, and this administration's response was to pardon every single one of them on day one, and then turn around and build a secret domestic threat list that somehow doesn't include the groups that were actually convicted of trying to stop the incoming president from taking office. Really makes you wonder what the selection criteria are. National security experts at Lawfare and the Brennan Center wrote that labeling the anti-fascist movement a domestic threat organization is essentially a political statement dressed up as law enforcement. It has no legal basis and cites none. Here's the key thing. The federal law that defines domestic political violence only defines what domestic threat activity is. It doesn't give anyone the power to make a list. It doesn't create any new crimes. And it doesn't authorize the government to officially label any group or individual as a domestic threat. In other words, her entire legal basis doesn't exist. She is compiling lists under authority she does not have, keeping them secret from the body that is supposed to oversee her, and targeting beliefs that are explicitly protected by the First Amendment. But sure, the real problem is that congresswomen keep asking her questions. Here's where things stand. The Attorney General confirmed under oath that she has compiled a list of organizations the administration considers domestic threats. She will not share it with Congress. She will not confirm who is on it. There is no legal process for anyone to challenge their inclusion. And the underlying memo targets political beliefs, not crimes. This issue is bigger than any one group or political fight. The real question is whether the United States government can keep a secret list of its own citizens and organizations based on their beliefs, call them threats without clear legal authority, and refuse to tell anyone including Congress, who is on it, or why. Systems like that echo tactics from the McCarthy era, now combined with modern national security power. Scanlon's warning matters because history shows that abuses like this helped bring down McCarthy and Nixon, and the only question now is how much harm happens before accountability comes again. The situation has reached a point where basic limits on government power still have to be explained to leaders, which shows how easily important lessons can fade over time. If you found this breakdown helpful, make sure you like this video and drop your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to hit the bell icon so you never miss when I post new content. Share this with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe for more deep dives like this. Thanks so much for watching.